This book isn't for somebody who's suffering from PTSD. This book is for the people that may encounter somebody who does have some depression or mental issues, and make them aware of our characteristics and symptoms of the things that they're going through, and just kind of educate them that you're not always going to see what these problems are, but sometimes just caring is really the best medicine you can give somebody.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Hey everybody! So, 20 years ago, Donald Dunn was leading soldiers through some of the most dangerous places on Earth. Today, he's leading a different kind of mission, one that turns trauma into triumph and transforms the voiceless into voices that can't be ignored. On today's podcast, I am excited to introduce an author who doesn't just write a book, he writes a prescription for healing an entire community. Donald's journey from decorated combat veteran to multimedia entrepreneur and supernatural storyteller proves that sometimes our greatest wounds can become our most powerful weapons. So, without further ado, Donald, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So, stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, of course. I'm very excited for this one. I love stories like this where you can have many different experiences in your life, highs and lows and struggles and triumphs, but then you're able to kind of take all that and put it into the written word and share it with others. So it's going to be a really fun conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that being said, I guess I just have to start off by asking a little bit about yourself. Let's give our listeners a little bit of context into who you are. And I did give a little bit of that information. But tell me a little bit more. What made you decide to start putting your experiences on paper and turning it into the books that we have here today?
So I think the where this all really started from was podcasting. Actually, I got my own podcast. I've had it for years, and I discovered it had turned into therapy for myself. And between some great guests that I've had that were able to help me, I got to the point where I was ready to explain to my wife and children that have been with me through the whole military experience that the things that I went through and what had caused some of the changes that they had seen. I never gave them that answer, but I definitely felt anger with them for not understanding me, and it took some healing before I understood that they didn't understand me because I never told them about it. Everything was always great when I was over there, and there was never any problems, and the bad dreams were just bad dreams, and I didn't remember what they were about. So that was the context that they had. So I wrote a document. It wasn't even supposed to be a book, called Echoes of War, The Silent Transformation of a Soldier. And it started out, like I said, just as a document. I wanted to have this conversation with my kids and my wife and not have to deal with questions and being led off track. I just wanted to give them the information to the questions that they may have had, but never asked. And that's how it started. My daughter actually convinced me to publish it, and so I did, and it turned out to do really well. I got a lot of reviews back about how it had helped families understand what their spouses were going through, and that was really the point, to give people the option to decide whether they should tell people about the traumas that they're dealing with.
Understood. Yeah, well, wow, it's a very unique approach to how, this came to be then. I think a lot of authors, they spend years, they know what they want to write or they have an idea for it and they plan it out and they make an outline and everything like that. But for you, it's more so a method to expressing what you're going through and more so directed towards your family at first. And then it kind of became something more after that. So I like that almost reverse effect.
Yeah.
Goes to show how much passion's behind it. Um, so really, really interesting there. But then I guess I have to just ask too. I mean, you kind of embed, real life PTSD experiences and
science too behind it, I'm sure, but also you interweave it with supernatural demons. So, what inspired that choice?
So I do a lot of nonprofit work. We have a nonprofit for veterans that are becoming musicians. And when you're dealing with a lot of people, especially people that have never experienced trauma for themselves, you hear a lot of negativity about how some feel that veterans are just doing this for increased benefits. Some people say they're just asking for attention. You get all this stuff, and it all boils down to the fact that one person is dealing with something that another person can't see or relate to. And so, my mission is still to help people with mental health issues, especially PTSD. I went through it, and I know what it takes to get to the other side. And it's not easy. And so the last thing people really need is non-supportive people that like to voice their opinions. So I wrote this book specifically for them, and I took and weaved the paragraphs and the statements that you hear in the veteran community, especially about how he lost his battle to demons or they're fighting their demons. And I wanted to turn it into a way that somebody who's never dealt with trauma could understand. And in order to do that, I had to turn it into something physically that could be seen. So that is where the idea of taking a problem from somebody's mental issues and putting it into a physical entity that other people could relate to, especially people that are into the supernatural and stuff like that. Um, a lot of the symptoms that these people in the book encounter are the exact same symptoms that they're encountering in real life. It's just being brought on by now a demon that is following them and feeding off of them.
Understood. And since you just mentioned that it's experiences that people are encountering in real life, I suppose that means there had to be a substantial amount of research that went into your book. Of course, a lot of it does come from personal experience, but transitioning into like the I guess that research phase, did you have a certain process for that, or is it solely from experience?
Yeah, so, a lot of the symptoms that people encounter are the same,
Hmm.
regardless of where their trauma came from, right? It's the triggers that trigger them that differ from person to person. Somebody sexually assaulted is gonna have something completely different that's gonna trigger them than, say, a veteran that was in combat, where a loud noise or something may trigger them. And that part of it's different, but everything else is about the same. And the reason is because this is a human response to a bad situation. This is how the body is taking care of itself to keep you alive. And so I added those types of characteristics with the characters, and I chose homeless veterans because they're the ones that are discarded and not seen and not heard of. And when you do talk to them, a lot of people just don't believe them. They all have addictions, which is down the road, you're going to find that almost everybody that has PTSD suffers from some form of addiction, whether it be alcohol, drugs, gambling, porn, something. There's going to be something that they're going to try to use
Advice.
to get to numb the pain that they're feeling. Um, you know, one of the things, I got a lot of tattoos, and a lot of people say, "Oh, you must love art." And I'm gonna be honest. Um, I got all these tattoos mostly because at least with the pain I could feel something, to
Mm.
where on a normal day I didn't feel anything. I just felt like I didn't fit, I didn't belong, and those voices started telling myself that. It affected me as a person, a leader, and all this stuff happened, before I even got out. It changed me, myself, and who I was, and then caused me to not love myself anymore. And so that's something that you'll see throughout this book is these guys go from feeling that they're nuts, they're the problem, they start having these symptoms and of guilt and depression and addiction and all of this stuff, not sleeping, and all the way through the book, even after they realize that these are physical um, items, not just something mentally that they're imagining in their head. To include, even at the beginning, one veteran can't see another veteran's um, demons. It comes
Mhm.
later that they can all start seeing all of them, and that's another part of it that, just because you're tied to a community and the trauma is the same doesn't mean you're going to completely understand what the other person is going through.
Exactly, right. So I guess like this book in that in a way is meant to open our minds to that, to kind of see what people might be going through and to realize that we have more in common than we might think in that regard. So I mean for them too, especially. And I guess that's probably why you chose to create fictional characters to kind of portray those roles. And I think this might be a good time for us to transition exactly into the characters themselves. I mean, Tank, for example, he's a homeless veteran, like you mentioned before. So tell us a little bit more about that, about their characterization process. What was the thought work that went into these specific characters?
So the primary characters is Tank and Doc, and Tank is a leader. He suffers from PTSD from losing um, friends and soldiers that served underneath him in his squad, and that's where a lot of his depression comes from, is the guilt of not being able to bring them back home. And so that's where he suffers from. He is an alcoholic and accepts that, and he accepts that he is part of society's trash and nobody really wants anything to do with him. He is also the first to realize that there is a way to fight these demons, and that is, he discovers it by accident, and that is, he will listen to um, what other people are saying. He will then also channel his thoughts away from the guilt, but just to the remembrance of the good times that he had with his squad and the things that had happened. And he noticed that reduced the power from these demons. He then goes to Doc, where he discovers that she has been trying to figure these things out as well, and they all live pretty much in the same place under the an overpass in Atlanta, and that is where the story really takes off from, is once him and Doc sit down. Doc was a female medic in the military. She still feels that she is a medic and has value and help, and she goes to a lot of these homeless shelters to help other veterans, even though she's living in a car herself. She still carries her aid bag that is part of her and her character,
Mhm.
and she is um, she approaches this more in a scientific method. She takes a lot of notes and does a lot of research and interviews, while Tank takes things more on the tactical side and tries to gather more troops to help and to make people aware of the situations that are happening, even if they won't listen, to include just other veterans, and you'll see how those conversations have become very awkward that he has with him and other veterans, to even find out if they're seeing things without them thinking that he is completely nuts and discarding him. And you'll see how those conversations come about, and you'll see how Doc takes this other side, and that is really, I'm gonna be honest, that kind of came from myself and the people I dealt with. I lost a very close friend over there who was a medic, and he was an amazing medic, and um, a lot of that stuff that I wrote about Doc is real similar to his personality, and I took a lot of his traits and put it in her. Tank was more kind of like myself. I really enjoyed being with my soldiers and training them and educating them, whether it was for marital problems or combat. It didn't matter. I just really loved being around younger troops.
Understood. Well, wow, I think it's really inspiring that you kind of took from all these different people in your life and picked those qualities and those experiences and meshed them into these roles, if I'm understanding correctly. And I think that's again kind of just going back to making people see different perspectives. I think that's very inspiring to do. And I think in a way it's almost like a message that you're trying to get to the reader, right? Like telling us tell them like, you know what, we need to open our minds to what people are going through. Would you say that's kind of like a
Yep.
overarching theme to the book, or perhaps you have
It's
another.
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly, the point is you can still learn something even though it's fictional. A lot of children's stories are fictional, but they come with lessons learned in them. And this is similar. Like I said, this book isn't for somebody who's suffering from PTSD. This book is for the people that may encounter somebody who does have some depression or mental issues, and make them aware of characters and symptoms and or characteristics and symptoms of the things that they're going through, and just kind of educate them that you're not always going to see what these problems are, but sometimes just caring is really the best medicine you can give somebody.
Right, I like that. I love that quote too. Caring is the best medicine you can give somebody, because you're absolutely right. Thanks for sharing that with us. So to go into the writing process itself a little bit, I guess I have to know. It must have been really challenging to write this book. Going back into your memories and putting on the pages. But was there a certain part that you found more challenging than others to work with, or I'm not sure. I think a lot of authors can benefit from knowing those kind of strategies, how to get through those tough recollections and, portray them in the written word. So, was there a certain strategy that helped you best, would you say?
Yeah, I'll say, the most difficult part got to the point when the story wasn't so much focused on the mental health aspect, but you have to have some entertainment part of this too. And when the main war starts happening between these demons and the soldiers that are in the story, some of that got really challenging because it's nothing like my any of my experiences that I had ever encountered. The a combat scene from the states where military bases are being targeted is a lot harder to write about when it's never happened in in my lifetime. So a lot of the book, I'm originally from Georgia, so it was obvious Atlanta was kind of a good spot for me to write about because I could relate to it quite a bit. Some of the tactical moves that they made, I was aware of how to do those and how to create those. But when it got away from me was when you get outside that realm and you're trying to show a different type of tactic that the enemy, so-called enemy, you would use. And then when you're dealing with something that's not even human, I have no clue how aliens would ever what tactics they would use if they ever attacked. And
Right.
so some of that became very difficult for me to write about. And I kind of used, some movies. I would watch some movies to get an idea of the plots and how things happened there. Um, from other supernatural books I have read. And so some of that I took from there and still kind of being in the moment with the main philosophy. And that's where a lot of that came from, was just outside research from other people that write science fiction or fiction in general, because this is the first fiction book I wrote. To include my next book. My next book is not a fiction book either. It's in regards to trying to get the military to start using pre-training for PTSD instead of reactive training. It's something that I plan on taking to Congress eventually, and hopefully the military can start implementing some of these proven methods that your top athletes in the world use to improve themselves. So it is.
Yeah.
I've learned that it is much harder to write for me, anyways. It's much harder to write science fiction and fiction than it is to write about a topic that I'm pretty knowledgeable in.
Yeah. I love that you're advocating for that too. I think you're definitely right. You need to have preemptive measures, not just reactive measures. That's the only way that progress can really be made at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. And hopefully by having this book out there and really spreading the word, it can kind of start to get the momentum going for that sort of a change, that sort of shift.
Yeah, I hope so.
Or you're hoping to take it to the government and all that. But that's one step that you're working on next. But what else might you have in the future, in the work bin right now that you've been dabbling at? Do you have any other books in mind? Is any current projects that we can be excited for? What do you think?
To be honest, I'm hoping to move to as a keynote speaker. I would like to speak to a lot of trauma groups, veteran affair, VFWs,
Right.
places like that where there's veterans out there from different generations. Um, and that's one of the challenges that our VA has is our last war was 20 years long. You have the guys that got out right there at the beginning of the war, the guys that got out in the middle of the war, and the guys that finished the war, and that's all three different generations. Not one of those last three generations are the same. And
Mhm.
so what works for, you know, helping somebody who is 22 with PTSD is probably not going to work for the same person that's 45. And I think that's one of the challenges that the VA has, because we did not do any type of pre-training on what is PTSD. We sent soldiers over there. Myself, I spent 68 months fighting, and out of a 20-year career, that's over 20% of my career was spent, with a rifle in my hands. And to do no training or preparation for trauma, it's a long road to get back to somewhat of a normal life when you come back. And my goal is to hopefully reduce that. And so I feel that speaking events would probably help me spread that mission just a little bit more.
Absolutely. I love that. That's so exciting that, you're doing that, and you're absolutely right. Getting out there and talking about it is just going to continue spreading the word. So, considering all of this, I have to know now, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Do you have a certain like website or social media that people could follow and kind of know when those speaking events start to take off? What do you think?
Absolutely. My main spot that people can learn about me, to include our nonprofit, is donalddunn.me. So
Mm.
real simple. There you can follow my blog. I do a lot of writing about articles and news that's happening with our veterans, and I list a lot of resources if people need help. Small nonprofits that may have came on my podcast. You can watch my podcast there. You can um, buy my books, follow any new books that's coming out, and even book me as a keynote speaker if you would like. So it's a one stop all for all.
I love it. And we're going to put the links of this in the description box of this podcast today, everybody. So you can go ahead and, click on over and, get in touch and get connected right away. Thanks for sharing that with us. But so as we begin to wrap up our show today, I just have to know if you have any writing tips for the authors in the audience today. We spoke a bunch about different, areas that we could be focusing on, from character development to, research, to talking about struggles in your books. But what else? What did you wish that you knew when you first got started as a writer?
So, I think for me the editing process is just brutal. I struggle. It takes me longer to edit the books than it does to write the books, and it can be very daunting. So, my suggestion is, if you're new to writing, don't get overwhelmed with it. Start out with something that you're passionate about, even if that is nonfiction or fiction.
Mhm.
Um, if you're passionate about it, when things get tough, you're going to, even if you pause. My first book, it took well over a year because I set it down when things got tough. And at some point, because I was so passionate about it, I did pick it back up and continue until I finally got through it and finished. And I think that's the part that is important for a new author, is to make sure that you're focused on your passion and not dollar signs for writing. It's going to help you when you get to the editing process or any of these other processes that you find very, very difficult. It's going to help you through those times.
Understood. No, thank you for sharing that with us. And I think I particularly like what you said about, the editing process taking longer than the writing, because I think we could all relate to that for sure. You
Absolutely.
get the writing out there, but you need to make it the best it could possibly be after the fact. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for this whole conversation. It's really been inspiring to hear what you've been through, what you've achieved, and the message that you're carrying across to everybody. So
Thank you.
it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And to all of our listeners out there today, if you feel inspired by this conversation, again, check out Echoes of War on Amazon. Check out Donald's podcast and go to the links that we're going to have in the description box today so you can stay well informed. And again, just remember you're not alone in this fight. Donald proves to us that your story has the power to heal, not just yourself, but countless others while walking the same path. So keep writing your own comeback story because the world needs your voice. We'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.